Welcome back to This is Thailand. Now, most of the stories we tell on this channel follow a shape you probably recognize by now. Man arrives, man falls hard, man loses money, man goes home wiser and poorer, wondering how he didn't see it coming. And those stories are real and they matter and we'll keep telling them. But every so often we get one that doesn't fit that shape, one that's harder to summarize, one where you finish hearing it and you're not quite sure what you feel, and you sit with it for a while, and it stays with you. This is one of those. Brendan is 51 years old. He's from County Leitrim in the northwest of Ireland. Rural, quiet, the kind of place where people know each other's business and mostly have the decency not to mention it. He spent most of his working life as a coal miner. He came to Thailand not chasing nightlife, not chasing youth, not chasing any of the things you might expect. He came chasing something much simpler and much harder to protect yourself against. What happened to Brendan in Thailand is complicated. What it cost him is complicated. And what he thinks about it now, sitting back in Leitrim, renting a small place, doing a bit of fencing work for a neighbor, is the most complicated part of all. This one's going to stay with you. Here's his story, in his own words, right? So, where do I start? The Erigna mines. You probably haven't heard of them, which is fine. Most people haven't, even in Ireland. They were in County Roscommon, just over the Leitrim border. Ireland's last coalfield, they used to say, which sounds grand until you understand that Ireland's coal was always poor stuff, thin seams, hard work, not like the Welsh pits or the Yorkshire mines. Nothing romantic about it. We weren't in some great industrial tradition. We were just men underground because that's what there was. I started there when I was 17. My father had been there, his brother before him. You didn't think too hard about it. You went down because that's what the men in your family did, and you came up at the end of the shift, and you did it again the next day. 23 years of it, give or take. And then the mine closed in 1990, and that was that. Whole community, just done. You couldn't be angry at anyone in particular, which made it worse in a way. Nothing to push against. I retrained. Did construction work, whatever was going. Concrete mostly, groundwork. It wasn't the mines, but it was outside, which I didn't hate. The money was all right, and I had Siobhan, so the work was just the work. The rest of it was her. We'd known each other since we were children, married young. I was 22, she was 20. People did that then, in places like Leitrim. No children, as it turned out. We tried for a while, and then we didn't try. And then we just got on with things, the two of us, and the years went by, and honestly, it was a good life. I don't say that to make myself sound noble. I say it because it's true and because I think it matters for understanding what came after. She got sick in 2019. Ovarian cancer. They found it late, which is the way it goes with that one. It doesn't announce itself. By the time it announced itself, it had been going on for a while. I won't go through the whole of it. It took 3 years, roughly. The first year was treatment. She drove herself to appointments when she could, and when she couldn't, I drove her. Every Tuesday to Sligo, for 14 months. She'd sit in the back sometimes because she liked to lie down. I'd put the radio on low and not talk because she didn't want talking. She wanted to get there. So I'd just drive. The last 18 months, I was her full-time carer. I gave up the construction work. What else was I going to do? She needed someone there, and I was the person who was there. I washed her hair. I got her to the bathroom when she couldn't manage it herself. I sat with her at 4 in the morning when the pain was bad, which was most nights toward the end. She didn't want me to say anything. She just didn't want to be alone. So I'd sit there in the chair by the bed and hold her hand in the dark and not say a word. She died on a Thursday in February 2023. I had the house sold by April. People thought that was strange, selling so fast. My sister Orla said, give yourself time. Don't make big decisions. A couple of lads from the village said the same in their own way, the clumsy way men say those things, and I understood what they were getting at. But the thing is, I couldn't be in that house. It still smelled like her. Not in a bad way, I don't mean that. Just in a her way, her soap. The specific way the bedroom smelled. I'd walk in and she was everywhere in it, and she was nowhere in it, and I just couldn't. So I sold it, got 158,000 euros for it after everything was settled. put it in the bank, rented a room in Carrick-on-Shannon for a few months, which was grim, and that was fine. Grim suited me at the time. I don't really drink, so I wasn't down the pub every night. I don't have hobbies, not really. I had Siobhan. So what I had mostly was evenings sitting at a table in a rented room with the laptop open and nowhere to be. And that's how you end up watching YouTube at 2 in the morning. That's how anyone ends up watching YouTube at 2 in the morning, I imagine. I found this video about Chiang Mai. Temple in the morning light, mountains behind it, markets, all these colors. And I sat there and I watched it and I thought, that looks nothing like Leitrim. That looks like somewhere I've never been and couldn't have imagined. And something about that felt not exciting, but necessary. Like I needed to look at something that bore no resemblance to my life. I want to be careful here because I know what people assume when a 51-year-old Irish widower starts watching Thailand videos at 2 in the morning. I'd watched enough of those videos to know what some men went there for, and that wasn't it. Or at least, that wasn't the top of my mind. I just wanted somewhere that didn't know me. Somewhere I could be nobody's husband and nobody's widower, and just a man in a place, eating food, watching things happen that had nothing to do with me. I booked a flight 3 months out, return ticket, though I wasn't sure I'd use the return. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not until I was already at the airport in Dublin, queuing for security. Then I texted Orla. She rang me back immediately and I didn't pick up. I felt bad about that. I still feel a bit bad about that. But I got on the plane. Suvarnabhumi Airport at 6 in the morning is a particular kind of overwhelming. I'd flown through Dubai on the way, 9 hours, then 4 more, and I stepped out of arrivals into this wall of heat and noise and exhaust, and I stood there for a moment just adjusting. A man trying to sell me a taxi was already at my elbow. Another one behind him. I just pointed at the queue for the official desk because that seemed the safest thing to do, and a young woman in a yellow vest smiled and waved me over and sorted me out without fuss. 20 minutes later, I was in an air-conditioned car watching Bangkok slide past the window in the early light, all motorway and hoardings and construction cranes, and I thought, right. Good. None of this looks like anywhere I've ever been. I'd done a bit of reading before I left. Not a lot, but enough to know that Irish passport holders got 30 days on arrival, and that I could extend it at an immigration office for another 30 if I needed, which I thought I probably wouldn't. I thought I'd be home in 3 weeks. Chiang Mai was the plan, such as it was. The video I'd watched, the temples, the mountains. I took a domestic flight up from Bangkok and found a guest house near the old city. Small place, clean enough, fan in the room, 450 baht a night, which worked out to about €12. That suited me fine. I'm not a man who needs much. The first week I just walked. That's what I do when I don't know what else to do. I'd walk the moat road around the old city in the morning when it was still bearable. Maybe 30 degrees by 8, which sounds savage, but there was shade, and the monks were out doing their alms rounds. These long lines of orange moving through the streets while the market vendors set up around them, and there was something about the routine of it, the orderliness that I found. I don't know. Calming isn't quite the right word. Steadying, maybe. I ate what was in front of me. Cow tom from a cart near the guest house in the mornings. Rice soup with a bit of pork and ginger. Cost about 60 baht, less than €2. Pad kra pao for lunch. I'd point at things and someone would bring them and they'd be good. Nobody knew my name. Nobody needed anything from me. I could sit at a plastic table on a side street and watch the world go past and be entirely invisible, and it was, I'm telling you, one of the great reliefs of my life. But I'm not built for that indefinitely. After 3 weeks, 4, the walking started to feel circular. I'd seen the main temples, Doi Suthep up on the mountain, the ones in the old city. I like them. I'm not religious, but I like the atmosphere of them. The bells, the incense, the way people move through them without drama. But I'd seen them now, and I started to notice the other Farang in Chiang Mai, the ones who seemed to have been there a long time, sitting in the same cafes on Niman Road every morning. And they had a particular look about them, a kind of settled purposelessness, and I didn't want to become that. I met Fergal in the guest house common room. Retired school teacher from Tipperary, 63, had been coming to Thailand for 8 years. We ended up talking one evening over bad instant coffee. He didn't drink either, which was a relief because I wasn't in the mood to sit with someone nursing a chang at 6 in the evening and pretending it was grand. He asked what brought me up to Chiang Mai, and I gave him the short version, which was just that I'd fancied a change of scene. He nodded like that was a perfectly sufficient answer, which I appreciated. He mentioned Hua Hin, said it was different to the tourist spots, quieter, more Thai, not built around what foreigners wanted the way Pattaya or Patong were. He'd spent 2 months there the previous year, said the food was good and the beach was nothing special, but that wasn't the point. The point was it felt like somewhere actual people lived. I looked it up that night, booked a bus ticket for the following Thursday. The bus south took about 4 hours, maybe a bit more. I got in during the afternoon and the light was different down here. Flatter, more open, the sea visible between buildings as the bus came into town. I found a guest house on a side street about 10 minutes walk from the night market, negotiated a monthly rate of 12,000 baht, roughly 312 euros, which felt almost embarrassingly cheap. Settled in, the town suited me. I'll say that before anything else. It's not flashy. There are tourists, but they're mostly Thai tourists. Families on holiday from Bangkok, older couples, that kind of thing. The seafront is long and flat, and there are fishing boats in the early morning and a few beach chairs, nobody's sitting in by 7 because the day is already getting hot. I'd walk for an hour or so, come back, have breakfast at a little place that did khao man gai, poached chicken and rice, about 70 baht, and then read or just sit. I wasn't happy exactly, but I was functioning. That was more than I'd managed in Leitrim. I found the restaurant by accident. I was looking for somewhere to eat on my third evening and turned down a street near the night market, and there it was. A small, family-looking place, not aimed at tourists, plastic chairs outside, a chalkboard with the menu in Thai, and one line of English underneath. I went in because the smell was good. Tom yum, something grilling. Sat down. A young woman I didn't yet know was called Nok, brought me a menu and pointed at a few things and said carefully, "The fish is very fresh today, if you like fish." I said I did. It was. I went back the next night and the night after. The third visit, she seated me at the same table I'd taken the previous 2 times and said, without any preamble, "Tom yum soup and the grilled barramundi, same as before?" I said yes. And then I sat there for a moment after she walked away, and I had to be honest with myself about why that had affected me the way it had. Being remembered. 18 months of being someone's entire world, of being the person who knew every detail of someone's life, every preference and habit and fear, and then 6 months of being absolutely no one's anything. And this woman, who I'd sat in front of twice for 45 minutes each time, had noticed what I'd ordered. It's a small thing. I know it's a small thing, but small things have a way of landing differently when you've been empty for a while. She was 34. I found that out later. She ran the front of house, managing tables, talking to customers, keeping the whole room moving. Her aunt owned the place, she'd tell me eventually, been running it for 12 years. Nok had been there for 6 of them. She spoke careful English, not the quick, confident English you hear from people who've practiced it with tourists for years. This was more deliberate than that. She chose her words. She'd pause sometimes in the middle of a sentence and find the right one. It reminded me of someone who'd actually learned the language rather than just absorbed it. I thought, and I want to be precise about this, she seemed like someone who paid attention to things. I didn't think beyond that. Not that night anyway. The thing I keep coming back to when I think about those first weeks with Nok is how ordinary it all was. Not ordinary in a bad way. Ordinary in the way that a life is ordinary, routine, easy, the kind of thing you don't notice you've been missing until you have it again. I kept eating at the restaurant, every evening, more or less. It was the best food I'd found in Hua Hin, and that was genuinely why I went back, at first. The tom kha gai her aunt made, coconut milk and galangal and chicken, a flavor I'd never tasted before Thailand, and now can't imagine not knowing. I'd sit outside when the evening cooled a little and eat and watch the street, and there was a spirit house at the corner across the road. Small orange marigolds laid fresh in front of it every morning, and I found I liked looking at it. All of this I liked, and Knock was part of it. She'd come and check on me. Not attentively, not hovering. Just a word here and there between her other tables. Was the food all right? Had I been to the floating market? She asked questions that suggested she was actually curious about the answers, which is rarer than it sounds. She asked once what kind of work I'd done back in Ireland, and I told her about the mines, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Underground all that time? Does it feel strange to be somewhere so flat?" And I thought about that. I said I didn't know yet. She nodded like that was a reasonable answer. After about 10 days of this, she finished her shift one evening while I was still at my table and asked, quite naturally, if I wanted to walk a bit. So we walked. Along the seafront, past the vendors selling corn and mango, the sound of the water on one side and the motorbikes on the other. We didn't talk a great deal. That was fine with me. I'm not someone who fills silence for the sake of it, and she seemed to understand that without being told. This became the pattern. I'd eat, she'd finish, we'd walk if she wasn't tired. Sometimes we'd stop at a place that did fresh coconut juice and sit for a while. She told me a bit about herself. Grew up in Nakhon Ratchasima, what everyone calls Korat. Moved to Hua Hin 6 years ago to help her aunt when the restaurant was struggling. Eldest daughter. She said it plainly, the way you'd say I'm left-handed or I'm tall. Just a fact about herself, not a complaint. In Thailand, that means something specific, being the eldest daughter. I understand that better now than I did then. My 30 days ran out. I went to the immigration office on Fetkasem Road to extend. Another 30 days cost me 1,900 baht, about 50 euro, perfectly routine. Standing in that queue, I thought I should probably book my flight home. I didn't book it. One told myself I'd look at flights in the morning. I didn't look at flights in the morning either. The guest house was getting busier, high season coming in. A group of young German tourists arrived, and someone in the room above mine seemed to do everything. Sleep, talk on the phone, move furniture at 2 in the morning. Knock mentioned one afternoon, just once, that there was a small apartment building near her cousin's place, a 15-minute walk from the restaurant, quieter, cheaper per month than what I was paying. She knew the landlord. She didn't mention it again after that. I went and looked at it the next day on my own. 2 rooms, a small kitchen, a ceiling fan that worked. 15,000 baht per month, about 390 euros. The deposit was 1 month's rent, so 30,000 baht to move in, then 15 a month. I said yes. The total up front, deposit plus first month, came to 45,000 baht, roughly 1,150 euros. I paid it without much deliberation. I told myself it was a practical decision. Cheaper long-term, quieter, more comfortable. It was a practical decision. It was also something else. I knew that, on some level. I just didn't examine it very carefully. The apartment had a small kitchen, like I said. Electric hob, 2 rings, a kettle. The first afternoon Knock came round to see the place. She'd help me find it. It was natural she'd be curious. I made tea. Proper tea. I'd found berries in a supermarket near Central Festival, which had surprised me, and I'd bought it immediately. I made 2 cups, and we sat at the little table by the window and drank them and looked out at the street below. A woman selling mu ping from a cart, a dog asleep in the shade of a parked motorbike. I'm not going to say any more about that. You either understand why that mattered or you don't. She came by most evenings after that, on her way home from the restaurant. Sometimes she brought food from her aunt's place, leftover cow pad wrapped in plastic, larb that she'd make sure wasn't too spicy for me, though it still nearly finished me the first time. We'd sit and eat and talk or not talk. She laughed at my attempts at Thai. I'd practice the tones for the numbers, Nung, Song, Sam, and I'd get them wrong in ways that apparently meant something entirely different to what I intended, and she'd cover her mouth when she laughed, which I noticed. I want to be fair about this part. There was no agenda visible to me. She didn't ask for things. She didn't push toward anything. If I look at it now, I can see that a pattern was being established, that I was becoming useful to her, that the comfort of the arrangement was partly funded by the fact that I was clearly a man with some money and no real competing claims on it. But I couldn't see that then, and I'm not even certain she was thinking about it in such deliberate terms. It's possible she genuinely liked my company and also understood, somewhere underneath, that this situation had practical value. Both things can operate at the same time in a person. I know that because I've done it myself. What I noticed, when I noticed anything at all, she'd sometimes not answer my messages online for a day. No explanation, and then a message the next morning as if no time had passed. Something brief about family obligations. Her cousin needed something. Her aunt was unwell. I filed it as the way Thai family life worked. Close, demanding, constant. I'd read that somewhere. Probably watched it on YouTube at 2 in the morning back in Carrick-on-Shannon. I think about it now. The not answering. Should have asked more questions. Didn't. But she said something once, when I thanked her for recommending the apartment, for thinking of me. She said, and she meant it kindly, I believe she meant it kindly, "It's better you're comfortable. That's all. It's better you're comfortable." I thought it was warmth, a person looking out for another person. It was, maybe. Partly. By month 3, we were just together. Nobody said it that way. There was no conversation, no agreement, nothing formal. It was more that the question of whether we were together stopped being a question. She was there most evenings. I was expected at the restaurant. Her aunt, a small woman called Mei Deng, who ran the kitchen and everyone else with equal efficiency, had started saving me a particular table near the window without being asked. Her 2 cousins, Fawn and Jean, had started giving me a little nod when I came in, the kind of nod you give to someone who belongs. I hadn't met the mother. Nock mentioned her often. How she was doing, something she'd said on the phone, a recipe she'd asked Nock to write down. The mother lived in Korat. It was a few hours north by bus. Too far for a day trip, Nock said, and she couldn't take time off from the restaurant easily. I accepted this without any particular thought. People have family arrangements that are complicated by distance. This is not unusual. What was unusual, though I didn't frame it that way at the time, in 3 months I hadn't met a single member of her immediate family. Her aunt, yes, the cousins, but not her parents, not the brother she mentioned occasionally. I'd offered once to go with her if she ever visited Korat. She'd said her father was traditional, that meeting a foreign man required some preparation, some handling of the situation in advance. I said, of course, no rush. And that was that. I think about that conversation sometimes, the phrase she used, handling the situation. I took it as cultural sensitivity. I'm still not entirely sure I was wrong to. We were about 3 months in when she brought up her mother's eyes. She did it carefully, the way she did everything. Not as a request, more as something she was carrying and needed to set down for a moment. Her mother had cataracts, had been told she needed surgery for months. Nock had been putting money aside when she could, but it wasn't enough, and she didn't want to wait longer because her mother's vision was getting worse, and she was worried about her managing on her own in the house. She said she didn't want to ask me. She said that specifically. "I don't want to ask you." And then she stopped. I transferred the money the next morning, 120,000 baht, which was about 3,100 euros. I did it before she arrived that evening so that when she came and started to say something else about it, I could tell her it was already done. The look on her face, I believed that. I still believe it. Surprise and something that looked like relief, and something underneath both of those that I couldn't name and didn't try to. You have to understand. I'm a man who sat beside a hospital bed for 18 months. Medical need is not something I am capable of weighing carefully against financial caution. It's not in me. Someone's mother needed surgery, and I had money sitting in a bank account that I hadn't spent because I genuinely couldn't think of anything to spend it on. 120,000 baht was 3% of what I had. The arithmetic was almost irrelevant. This one felt real to me. I want to say that plainly. Every part of that transaction felt genuine. It still does. The months that followed were, I have to be honest, good. That's not what you're expecting me to say, I know. But they were. We had a routine. I'd sleep late, walk in the morning before the heat became ridiculous, do my shopping at the market near the clock tower, Two men there sold vegetables and I liked them. Like the 20 words of Thai I had that could get me what I needed without either of us being embarrassed by the gap. I'd read in the afternoon. Knock would arrive in the evening. We'd eat whatever she brought or I'd cook something simple. She taught me to make cow pad properly, standing at the hob telling me the oil wasn't hot enough yet. Not yet. Now, go quickly with the rice. I'd forgotten what that was like. Someone in my kitchen telling me I was doing it wrong. It sounds so unremarkable. It wasn't. She came to me with the brother's situation about 6 weeks after the surgery money. She was more formal about it this time. She sat down properly, both hands on the table, and she explained it clearly. Her younger brother Arm wanted to open a motorbike repair workshop. He had a space. He had experience. He'd worked for a garage in Korat for 4 years. What he needed was equipment, a hydraulic lift, tools, an air compressor. She had looked into it. The total would be 280,000 baht, roughly 7,200 euros. She called it a loan. She was specific about that. She said Arm would pay back 10,000 baht a month once he was operational, which would take about 90 days to get going. She even mentioned, unprompted, that she'd be happy to have him put something in writing if I wanted. The formality of it reassured me. I asked a few questions. How long had he been talking about this? Did he have any customers lined up? Was the space rented or owned? She answered everything steadily. She showed me a photo on her phone, a young man in a workshop somewhere grinning at the camera, grease on his hands. She didn't show me any documents or contracts, and I didn't ask for them. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it for 4 days, which is the longest I thought about any of these decisions. Then I said yes. The repayments never came. The first month's 10,000 baht didn't arrive at 90 days. I mentioned it once, mildly. She said Arm was still getting established. It would come next month. Next month came and went. I didn't mention it again. I'm Irish. We don't push. And I suggested after the second missed month that I'd like to meet Arm, just to say hello. She said he was busy with the workshop, still setting up. Maybe next time she went to court she could arrange something. I said fine. I sent Orla a postcard around this time. She still has it. I found out later she kept it specifically because it surprised her. She'd half expected to never hear from me again. I wrote that Hua Hin was treating me well, that the food was good, that I was doing all right. She would not hear about Nok for several more months, and even then, not the full picture. The postcard said I was doing all right. And I was. That's the thing I keep turning over. I genuinely was. The land came up the way the other things had come up. Not as a sudden ask, but as a situation that already existed and needed dealing with. That's the thing I've thought about a lot since. Nothing was ever framed as, give me money. It was always, here is a problem, and I would arrive at the money on my own. She mentioned it first in passing, sometime in August, her father's land in Korat. There was a government scheme, she used that phrase, a government scheme, to regularize old land titles, address inheritance complications from the grandfather's era. She said it vaguely, like it was a headache she was carrying but didn't want to burden me with. I asked a question or two. She gave me a brief answer and changed the subject. A week later, she mentioned it again. A bit more detail this time. The land had been in the family for 2 generations, but the documentation was from the grandfather's time, and the title was unclear. Under this scheme, there was a deadline to submit the paperwork and the fees. If they missed it, the land would become harder to secure for the family. Her father was elderly and didn't understand the process. She was trying to manage it from a distance. I want to be clear. She never once suggested I would own any part of this. She knew and I knew that foreigners can't own land in Thailand. It's not possible. She didn't pretend it was possible. She said, this is the family's land. We just need help securing what's already ours. I asked what was involved. She explained there was a legal fee for the title registration and a goodwill contribution, she called it that, a goodwill contribution, to the local office that administered these things. I don't know enough about how that works in Thailand to know how much of that was real and how much was constructed, and honestly, I'm still not sure it was entirely constructed. Thailand administration is genuinely complicated. I'd read that much. The conversations happened over about 3 weeks. She wasn't rushing me. She was patient, answered my questions, showed me a document on her phone that appeared to be official correspondence of some kind. It was in Thai. I couldn't read it. I didn't ask her to translate it in detail, which I think about. The total she eventually gave me was 640,000 baht. That's roughly 16,400 euros. Transferred in 2 installments. 320,000 baht in late September, another 320,000 baht 3 weeks later, once the first paperwork stage was supposedly completed. There was a voice. I'm not going to pretend there wasn't. Somewhere around the first transfer, a quiet voice that said, slow down. Don't. I didn't listen to it. I want to try to explain why. I had 158,000 euros in a bank account in Ireland. House money. The money from selling the place where Siobhan had lived and died, where I'd spent 3 years watching her get smaller. I hadn't touched it because I genuinely didn't know what I was saving it for. I had no plan. I had no house to buy. I had no future that I'd thought about in any meaningful way. The money just sat there and reminded me of where it came from every time I thought about it. 16,000 euro. That's 10% of what I had. 10% of money I hadn't earned doing anything useful for 3 years. 10% of money that, if I'm honest, felt slightly like it had been bought at a price I'd never want to calculate. That's not wisdom. I know that now. That's a man who's not well making a financial decision from a place of grief rather than sense. But that's what happened. October came. The evenings were cooler by then, just slightly enough to sit outside with some comfort. We were at the apartment one evening, and she mentioned her mother, said she was doing better, recovering well from the surgery, her vision improving. I was pleased to hear it. I said so. We talked about something else. Something lodged in me, though, quietly, not a shout, just a small piece of grit that I couldn't locate. I started noticing other things more consciously around this time. Knox's phone was always face down on the table between us. Had always been that way. I'd thought nothing of it for months. Now I noticed it deliberately. She stepped outside for every call she received when we were together. She'd come back in, put the phone face down, give some brief explanation. Her aunt, her cousin, the restaurant. I'd accepted all of it. Why wouldn't I? It matched the picture I had of her life. A woman with a complicated web of family obligations, always managing something from a distance. I asked once mildly when I might meet her father. Just to say it, she said he was traditional, that it would need careful handling, that she'd need to prepare him for the idea of a foreign man in her life. I said, of course, no rush. But I lay awake that night and I did the arithmetic for the first time, properly. The apartment money, the surgery, the brother's workshop, the land, added up and it was about 1,085,000 baht, call it 28,000 euros, that had moved from my account to hers over 7 months. I didn't panic. That's the odd thing. I lay there in the dark, fan turning slowly overhead, motorbike somewhere, out on the street below, and I just looked at the number, turned it over. 28,000 euro. Not nothing, not ruinous, but not nothing. And I thought about who had spent that money, what he'd been thinking, what he'd believed. I didn't recognize him entirely. I didn't mean that as a judgment, positive or negative. I just genuinely didn't recognize the man who'd written those transfers. He'd made decisions I wouldn't have made 6 months ago in Leitrim. Or would he? Maybe he'd have made them from a different kind of exhaustion. I couldn't say. I fell asleep eventually, got up in the morning, walked the seafront, watched the fishing boats come in, didn't do anything with what I'd been thinking. Not yet. November. We were sitting at the kitchen table one evening, the fan going, a couple of takeaway containers from her aunt's place between us. She'd brought massaman curry and sticky rice. I was eating. She was talking about something her cousin Fawn had said, some small drama at the restaurant. And then she mentioned in passing, almost as a footnote to something else, that her mother had an appointment coming up at the hospital in Koret, the cataract procedure, scheduled for next month. I put my fork down. I don't think she noticed. I didn't say anything. I'm from a place where, if you can't say something useful, you say nothing, and I couldn't yet say anything useful because I wasn't sure enough of what I'd heard. So I just listened to her finish the sentence about her cousin, said something about the curry being good, and the evening continued as it always did. But I sat with it afterward. Alone in the apartment after she'd gone, I sat with it very carefully. In October, she'd told me her mother's vision was improving, that she was recovering well. She'd said this as a piece of good news, the kind you share because it wraps something up. I remembered it specifically because I'd felt genuinely relieved. I'd paid for that surgery and I was glad it had helped. That's a clear memory. I wasn't confused about it. And now the cataract procedure was scheduled for next month. The same surgery, described the same way. As if October had not happened. I didn't sleep well that night. I didn't catastrophize either. That's not my way. I just turned it over. Sat with it the way you sit with something in the dark that doesn't quite resolve. I thought about the other things. Arm, the brother, who I'd still never met despite 8 months of being together. The father who was too traditional to meet a foreign man, but had accepted 640,000 baht of a foreign man's money toward his land. The phone always face down. The calls always taken outside. None of these things had seemed like a pattern when they were happening. Assembled together in the dark at 2 in the morning, they began to look like something else. I didn't contact her for 2 days. Said nothing. She messaged online asking if I was all right. I said I had a cold, which wasn't true but wasn't the kind of lie I felt bad about. I needed the 2 days. I needed to think properly before I did anything, because I'm not someone who acts on half-formed suspicion, and I didn't want to accuse her of something and be wrong. I thought about Cheon, retired man from Galway, 60 or so, had been in Hua Hin for 9 years. Knew the place the way only long-term residents know a town. We'd had coffee exactly once at a cafe near the market a few months back. He'd mentioned in passing that if you ever needed to know something about someone locally, there was a Thai man he used occasionally for background checks. Discreet, reliable, not cheap. He'd said it the way you say these things in expat communities. Not as a warning, just as information, filed away for whenever. I messaged Seon, kept it vague, said I had a situation and wanted to make some inquiries. He rang me back the same afternoon, which I appreciated, and didn't ask for details I wasn't offering. He gave me the contact. The Thai man charged 8,000 baht for a basic report, about 208 euros, and said 10 days. 10 days is a long time when you're waiting for confirmation of something you already half know. I kept things normal with Nok. We had dinner twice. I made tea. I listened to her talk. I was not unkind. I was just watching differently, cataloging, the phone going face down when she arrived, the brief disappearance outside when it rang, the way certain questions got answered in ways that redirected rather than answered. The report came back on a Tuesday morning. I read it slowly. It was partly in Thai and partly in translated English, typed up simply, no drama in the language. Nok was real. She worked at the restaurant, had for years. Her family was real. The aunt, the cousins, the parents in Korat. All of it checked out. She was who she said she was in every verifiable respect. But she had a partner, a Thai man from Nakhon Ratchasima, the report said. The relationship appeared long-term. He appeared in provincial records with shared address history and social media that Brendan wouldn't have seen because Brendan wasn't on Facebook, and Nok had never shown him any. The nature of the arrangement, whether common law, whether understood as permanent, the report couldn't say. But the man existed, had existed throughout the 8 months Brendan had considered himself to be, in some quiet and unspoken way, with Nok. The land money, the report noted, had indeed gone to a real family landholding in Nakhon Ratchasima province. This was not invented. The land was real. Brendan simply had no legal claim to it, had never had any claim to it, and under Thai law could never have had any claim to it. I sat at the kitchen table for a while, made tea, looked out the window at the street. A dog was doing what it did every morning, moving slowly along the pavement looking for shade. Motorbike went past. The woman with the Mu Ping card had set up early. She came over that afternoon as she usually did. I'd made tea again. 2 cups, same as always. I let her sit down. I let her get settled. And then I told her, quietly and without raising my voice, that I knew about the man in Korat. She went very still, and then she cried. Not performatively, not the kind of crying that's doing something, just crying. She put her hands over her face and she cried, and I sat across from her, And I didn't reach for her because I didn't know what the tears were for. Whether they were for being found out, whether they were for something she'd actually felt, something that was now over, whether they were for the version of things she'd been managing, the complicated life she'd been running, finally coming apart in a way she hadn't wanted. I still don't know. She didn't deny it. I'll say that. She didn't try to tell me I was wrong or that I'd misunderstood. When she could speak, she said something I've turned over 100 times since. She said, "I thought you understood the situation. Not I'm sorry. Not it wasn't what you think. I thought you understood." And there it is, really. The whole of it in one sentence. In her understanding of things, there was a situation, and she'd thought I understood it. In my understanding of things, I'd been falling in love with someone who was mine. Both of those things were happening at the same time, and we'd never once discussed them because neither of us had known how to begin. I asked her to go. She gathered her things without drama. She waved me at the door, that small bow, hands together, which seemed, I don't know, respectful, or the only gesture she had left. She went. I stood in the apartment for a long time after. The tea had gone cold. Outside, the street continued being a street. I stayed in Hua Hin for another 2 weeks after that. I want to be clear that it was a choice, not paralysis. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't Ireland for a little while longer, and I didn't see the point of running. You can't run from the thing that's inside you anyway. I know that much. I walked the seafront every morning, different direction than I used to go. Didn't want to pass the restaurant. I found a little place near the bus station that did proper cow tom, rice soup, the kind with the century egg in it that I'd been too cautious about for months. Had it every morning for a week. It was good. The woman who ran it remembered my order by the third day, which I noticed and then had to put down before it meant too much. I didn't contact Knock. She didn't contact me. That seemed right. I thought about the money. The full accounting, properly done for the first time. 28,000 euro in transfers, plus 8 months of living expenses. The apartment rent, food, the immigration extensions every 60 days, a bus trip here and there, the occasional excursion I'd talk myself into. All in, probably 35,000 euros over the 8 months. I had somewhere north of 120,000 euros remaining. I did the numbers on my phone one morning sitting on the seafront, the fishing boats coming in the distance. And I looked at the figure and I thought, that is not ruinous. That is not the story of a man who lost everything. That is the story of a man who paid a significant amount of money to find out something important about himself, and there are worse ways to spend 35,000 euro. I booked a flight home from Bangkok, took the bus up one night in a guest house near the airport, then the long haul back through Dubai. 13 hours of sitting with my own thoughts, which I'd had plenty of practice at. I rang Orla from Dublin Airport. She came to collect me herself, drove up from Clondalkin in the rain, which is very Orla. She looked at me when I came through arrivals and said, "You look better than I thought you would," which could have meant anything. And I didn't ask what she meant, and she didn't explain. I stayed with her for a month. Her house is full. Her husband, 2 teenagers, a dog that had no interest in me whatsoever, which I respected. She asked me some questions about Thailand. I answered some of them. I told her about Hua Hin, about the food, about the pace of the place. I told her I'd met someone, that it hadn't worked out. She didn't push for details. That's also very Orla. She did ask, once gently, whether I'd lost any money. I said a bit, yes. She nodded and didn't ask how much, and I didn't tell her. The number would have worried her, and worrying Orla was not something I wanted to do. She'd already spent a year worrying about me from a distance. I'm back in Leitrim now, renting a small place outside Carrick, different one from before. It's a fine little house, not like the house with Chauvin, nothing like it, which is both harder and easier than I expected. Harder because absence is absence. Easier because I'm not walking into rooms that used to smell like her. That particular pain, the one that had sent me to the airport with one bag and no plan, has shifted into something duller and more manageable. Not gone, just different in texture. I help a neighbor with his fencing 3 mornings a week. Physical work, outdoors, someone else to drink tea with at 11 o'clock. It suits me. I'm not sure what comes next, and I've decided that not knowing is all right for now. People ask me what I learned. It's a reasonable question, and I've thought about the answer carefully because I don't want to give the wrong one. I don't think Nok was a monster. I want to say that plainly. She was a 34-year-old woman managing an elderly father, a family landholding, a brother's business, a long-term partner in Korat, and her aunt's restaurant, and somewhere in the middle of all that, a lonely Irish man who showed up and had money and needed someone to make tea for. In her understanding of the world, those things could coexist. In mine, they couldn't. Neither of us explained our understanding to the other. That's not entirely her fault, and I don't think I was an idiot. Not entirely. I was a man who was not well, arriving somewhere new with a wound that was still open, and I mistook the relief of having that wound attended to for something more solid than it was. That's human. That's just people being people in the condition they're in. The money, the surgery money, I still believe that went where she said it went. I do. Some of the rest of it I'm less sure, but that one I think was real. What I'd tell someone, if someone came to me and said, I'm thinking of going to Thailand, I've just lost my wife, I need to go somewhere that doesn't look like my life, I wouldn't tell them not to go. I went, and there were 8 months of the world feeling bearable when it hadn't before, and that has some value I'm not able to precisely calculate. I'd tell them, go when you're ready, not when you're empty. Go when you have something to bring to a place, not just something you need to put down. The difference matters. You'll put it down either way. But if you go empty, you'll hand it to whoever is standing there, and they'll carry it for a while, and you'll call that love, and it might even be love. Partly. And then one day, you'll get the accounting, and it won't match what you thought you had. I went looking for someone to make tea for. I found one. For a while, I'm not sure what that's worth, but it's not nothing. That's Brendan's story. And here at This Is Thailand, we don't often get ones that end in that particular key. Not disaster, not triumph, but something more honest than either. A man who arrived broken, spent some money finding that out, and came home slightly less broken than he left. The thing we want you to take from this one, if you take anything, is that Thai family obligation is not invented for the benefit of foreign men. Nok was almost certainly managing real pressures that predate Brendan by years. The land, the parents, the brother. These things exist in Thai family life, whether a foreigner is present or not. Brendan walked into the middle of a life already in motion and mistook a role for a relationship. That's on both of them, and on neither of them, and mostly on the gap between two people who never found a shared language for what they actually were to each other. If you're carrying grief into a new country, it travels with you. It will find someone to rest against. That person will have their own reasons for allowing it. Neither of you is a villain. Neither of you is entirely honest. That's the story this channel tells, at its most complicated. Thanks as always for watching. This is Thailand. If Brendan's story touched something in you, or if you have your own, the comments are open. They always are. Subscribe if you haven't, and look after yourselves out there. We'll see you next week.